My name is Bruce Bedlam. I've been coming here to Stonehenge now for almost 20 years, and it is my expert opinion that this was a great building. The man who built Stonehenge knew as long as the stones remained, the information would be carried. He knew that someone would have the intellect to be able to understand and interpret the position, their orientation, the height, the distance apart, and be able to reconstruct Stonehenge again to finite detail. I realised I had a lot of questions about Stonehenge. Why are the stones so big? Why is it a circle? Why that particular diameter? Why these YZ holes around the outside? What were they for? And I realised I got so many questions I had to come up with one common denominator, one answer which would connect every question. And if there's one question left out, the whole thing wouldn't work. And I've come up with an answer which answers every question, and the whole thing fits together perfectly. If you've got the ability and the intelligence to be able to move those stones all that way and to stand them up, to put the lintels on top, I can't imagine people with that much intelligence standing in the rain. It would have to be a building. It just makes so much sense. On the outside of the Sarsen circle are two rings of holes. They're called the YZ holes. And the explanation has been that these holes were dug by mistake and they were allowed to fill in naturally. And that just didn't make any sense. Imagine the buttresses were here from the centre of the Sarsen stone upright, and they came down here. So this is where you would find the YZ holes. But they had stones in them, and these stones were buttresses, were footings for great big buttresses which went up and locked into place. Buttresses went all the way around the outside. So it would have been a very, very strong integral ring, a structure which would be able to hold up the roof. So if we go inside now and look at where the beams would have connected to the lintels. Now if we look up at the lintels, this is a good example where each beam of the roof would have come down and locked into the centre of each lintel, and it's only in the middle where it's actually been dressed to 90 degrees. So imagine each beam coming down onto each lintel, and there would have been 30 beams, one for each lintel. Now the lintels at Stonehenge, well, I can't imagine people working on scaffolding with a 7-ton block 25 foot high in everything in the air. It just doesn't make any sense at all. It was only later I realised that once the uprights had been put into position, the whole of the area was filled with soil. So you weren't working in the air, you were actually working on the ground. You were not working on scaffolding. You just can't pick up these great big stones and hold them up in the air and put them. You've got to be working on the ground. So while Stonehenge was being constructed, it looked like a great big mound with these, and the Sarsen circle was made as an integral ring. So the whole construction would be finished, completed, the roof tiles put on, even the interior painted, and only then would the soil be removed. It would have been quite wonderful, I should imagine, for the people who constructed it. You know, they had that much confidence. So it was only once I made the building, put the roof on, put the floor inside, people came along, said, yeah, that looks good. We can almost believe that. But then they try and trip me up. They said, but how did they move the stones? That's the real mystery.
The reason that they're tablet shaped or rectangular in shape is so that when you put them down on their side and you encase them in wood, this means they could be rolled. I think people of 4,000 years ago would have known if you cut a tree down, you can't lift it, but they knew you could roll it. And if you put this stone inside a huge wooden roller, you can all its weight's lost. The weight of the stone carries the stone, so it can be rolled along quite easily. I've now started work on producing a roller which is about a third the size they would have used here. So I'm going to be moving something in the region of about 10 ton stone in a 4-foot diameter roller. The stone fits inside the wood, it then encases it, and then it's bound on the outside with ropes, and the whole thing just rolls. So it's only once you've put the stone inside a roller and then try it, you realise just how little effort it would take. Most of the weight is distributed and lost because the weight of the stone is actually helping to lift the stone, so it's in perfect balance. When you approached Stonehenge from a distance, you wouldn't have seen the stones at all. You just would have seen a building, and it was the way it was designed, a very low level building. So imagine you're approaching the building, you're walking through the main door. So you walk forward, and it was here that we would have entered in. The doors would have been open. We're entering now into Stonehenge. It would have appeared to be a very dark and descending place. We wouldn't have even seen the stones. We go down this small corridor into this section here which was boxed in, and this was a place of anticipation, a place of waiting. And then when the doors closed behind you, only then would they have opened the inner doors, and you would have walked into the biggest surprise of your life. This massive room full of light, and these huge pillars appearing from here, appearing to hold up the roof. No longer an elliptical shape, but it appears to be a perfect circle, and each trilithian appears to be holding up 3 roof beams, 3 beams on each one. So it would have looked wonderful. And then as you walk forward, only then would you realise there was nothing holding up the roof. It would have been wonderful, wonderful. The whole experience, from the moment you came in to the moment you arrived in the centre of the room, it would have been awe-inspiring. You would not be able to comprehend what you were seeing. It would have been wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Even today, as I stand here and I understand it, imagine for the people who were coming in here for the first time, maybe foreign dignitaries, it would have been astounding. I've been studying Stonehenge now for almost 20 years, and I've discovered that it was a building,
I've also worked out how they moved the stones, the route which was taken, how the building was constructed, what it was used for, how it worked in relation to the sun. What I need to do now is take all this information and get it out to the world, by whatever means, by film or by book. But the best way would be to rebuild Stonehenge full size. Only then can people walk inside and see for themselves just how wonderful it was. Stonehenge. We all agree, henge means hang. And if you ever walk inside a big building, you can say, what's the span of the roof, or what is the hang? Now that's a builder's term. What's the hang of the roof? And if you go to Yorkshire, there's a big overhanging rock. It's called a henge. And if you walk inside an aircraft building, hangar. So the word hang was the span of the roof. And this great big roof with no internal supports was Stonehenge. Stonehenge. So the word Stonehenge was descriptive of the building. Most of the weight is distributed and lost because the weight of the stone is actually helping to lift the stone, so it's in perfect balance. So the only obstacle would be a gradient, and I've found a route from Marlborough Down along the side of Salisbury Plain. Now here I am on the edge of Salisbury Plain, and this is a huge escarpment which runs all the way around the edge of Salisbury Plain. Now the stones for the Stonehenge came from the other side of Pewsey Vale to my north, and it's been suggested that the stones were carried up this escarpment and over the top in a direct line to Stonehenge. But what I'm suggesting is that the stones were carried along the side and around along the side of the escarpment as far as Market Levington, and then left through what I call the gateway, where there's no incline at all. It would have been very easy to transport the stones by whatever means in that route, but I don't see how it's possible that you could lift stones up this huge escarpment. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't make any sense at all. Woodhenge was a large roundhouse, and being so big, I believe the weight of the roof would have been very heavy indeed. So I think there was a ring of buttresses on the outside to hold up the outer wall plate. Now, if you look at this outer ring, you'll see the post holes are a lot smaller.
And I believe that this was the outer ring of the building. So imagine this big roundhouse, all made of wood, and this outer wall plate was supported by buttresses, because the weight of the roof would have been pushing down on the outside again, and this would have been quite a small ring of buttresses just to support the outer walls. Now, as we go inside the building, a lot bigger supports here for the roof, and then as you go inside to the middle, all these posts going up now supporting the roof, but also I believe the whole thing would have been terraced going back like an auditorium. This was a place where they had debates and arguments. People would come into the middle here and take the floor, and representatives from all over the country would have come to represent their own town or village or tribe and their particular area. And so everyone had an opportunity to be involved. So it was quite a sophisticated civilization. So this is an extremely important place. It's an integral part of the civilization and how it worked in relation to Stonehenge. And the archaeologists all agree that this was a building, a place where gatherings of chieftains came to have debates and arguments which lasted over several days. We're all agreed with that. Woodhenge was a place of debates, arguments, where people came from all over the country and to bring and represent the tribes, their villages, their towns, and to come here and for decisions to be made on collectively. And only when they made the decision did they then take it to Stonehenge for proclamations to be made and for things to be endorsed. So the people were thinking people. They thought things through. They knew what they were doing. They were certainly not stupid, boring and glum, like most people think. If you've got the capability to move those stones and to build buildings as big as this and to organise yourselves, and you know, I think the level of intellect then, 4,000 years ago, was as good, if not better, than today. Technologies move forward, but mankind generally, well, I think they're retarded. We're going backwards, not forwards. The majority of people I've spoke to, archaeologists, would have been happy if I'd have said yes, it was a building. They could accept that if it was an earth floor and a thatched roof, and the people who built Stonehenge were boring and glum. But I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they were really sophisticated, and this wasn't an earth floor. In fact, it took me 2 years to work it out. It was a wooden floor. And the reason it took so long to work out is because I was thinking like we make floors today with joists and planks. But this wasn't like that. It was a huge, thick floor, solid wood. And all the wood came to the centre, all came down from the centre, through the actual Sarsen circle itself. So everything, the whole floor was all coming into the centre, all equal, and it would have been beautifully made. I think, you know, the building itself, the roof covering, marvellous, the light, the stones, everything about Stonehenge. But the main thing would have been, when you walked inside, would have been this huge wooden floor. And all going into the centre. And it was here in the centre, what I call the rotor. All the beams would have locked into place, all reaching out in every direction. So imagine the floor would have come to about here, maybe even higher, but about there. I would say about there, considering the size. So that only this section was showing. And these, I believe, these blue stones weren't just here for aesthetic reasons, but they, like everything about Stonehenge, they had a reason, and it was structural. And these two huge stones, I believe, would have held a great big seat, like a throne, and it would have appeared, because of the strength of these, the seat comes out here, it would have appeared as if it was unsupported, because it's supported at the back just by these two blue stones. There's 7 seats altogether in the inner circle. But what I've done is looked at them properly, and I believe the inner ones here were in pairs. And if you look over there, there's a pair and so on. I haven't got any proof, but it's my hypothesis at this stage that these were great big seats which were elevated off the ground, only supported by the blue stones themselves. So whoever sat in that seat was sitting on all the power and all the authority which was carried within these stones, which were over 1,000 years old before Stonehenge was even built. These were carrying tremendous power and tremendous authority. It's only when I completed the building and then I went inside with a camera, and at that stage I didn't understand the trilithians. They were in the right position, everything was set, but from where I was stood or where the camera was looking, it appeared to be a perfect circle. It wasn't an elliptical shape anymore, and it appeared as if the trilithians were holding up the roof. And you would have walked into the biggest surprise of your life. This massive room full of light, and these huge pillars appearing from here, appearing to hold up the roof. No longer an elliptical shape, but it appears to be a perfect circle, and each trilithian appears to be holding up 3 roof beams, 3 beams on each one. So it would have looked wonderful. It was all by design. Whoever constructed Stonehenge positioned the trilithians specifically for that moment when the person walked through the main door. It would appear as if they were holding up the roof. And only when you walked forward did you suddenly realise there was nothing holding up the roof. It would have been awesome. What I had when I started to build the model was the exact measurements of the stones, the size of the circle, the height, where the YZ holes were in relation to the circle. That's all I had. And when I started to piece it together, I put the beams on and they came every 3rd beam. And it couldn't be any other number, it had to be every 3rd one. The number 3 started to appear, and it was then I started to measure things and realised that every part of Stonehenge had been based and built. The whole thing had been built based on the number 3. One of the amazing things about Stonehenge is none of the not one thing is out of place. The word monument means to remember, and whoever built Stonehenge made it in a way that it could be rediscovered. Buildings of high status were not built at random, but in a specific way so that it could be rediscovered. It could be called sacred geometry, it could be called mathematics. But what I've discovered at Stonehenge is a symmetry far beyond anything I could ever imagine. The distance, as I stand here in the middle, the distance to the Sarsen Circle is exactly the same height as the building. The height of the Sarsen Circle is a third of the height of the building. The height of the Trilithian, exactly half the height of the building. So everything is in keeping. Everything is exactly as it should be. So it's been a wonderful experience of unfolding as I've discovered the mathematics within the building. A 3-to-1 ratio. Even the apex of the building is a height of 1 and a base of 3, so that it enabled me to reconstruct it down to finite detail. The building is going to speak for itself. I mean, I can talk till the cows come home, and people are going to be looking at me, and I don't want them to look at me. I want them to look at the building, look at what I've discovered, and make up their own minds. And that's all I ask. Look and see. Once you bring a stone to Stonehenge, the site, then you've got to lift it up. And again, I used my engineering experience, and I constructed again a series of models, and I found that if they used a lever, which was a small tree with a branch, used the branches as a basket, interweave it with willow, you could build a basket, fill it with ballast, and when the basket descends, you could raise the stone. And my calculations, by the size of the stones, 25-ton Sarsen stones, the way they're shaped, and the fact that you're lifting it from one end, I can lift a stone on a 50-to-1 ratio. That means a half a ton of ballast will lift a 25-ton stone vertical. So it wouldn't take a great deal of men to do it, but it would be over a period of days. So they move it a few inches and then repeat the process. When I looked at the ballast and what it could have been earth, it could have been stone, it could have been wood. You know, I chose stone, and when you look at ballast, because you've got to handball it in and out again, very laborious, very time consuming, I thought, well, yeah, if it was me personally, I would make round balls so that I can load the basket, and when it comes down I can then release them. The ballast would cascade out the back of this, and then we could carry on. So I had that in mind, and then only to discover one of the mysteries of Stonehenge is that they found hundreds of round balls used as packing for the stones. So I believe these were all part of this ballast for actually construction, and once they'd finished with it, they could then use it as packing. One of the most difficult things, which I've been reluctant to divulge, is that Stonehenge, the whole building, everything about Stonehenge was to carry the secret of glass. And
People find that difficult to believe. 4,000 years ago, there wasn't any glass in England anywhere else, only at Stonehenge. It was a centre of excellence. And when you walked inside Stonehenge, and imagine if it started to rain, it would have been like as if God's in charge. There's this roof held up by nothing, and it's raining outside, and yet it's not. There's a great big hole in the roof, and yet it's not. The rain's not coming through. It would have been too much. I can't imagine how they felt. I can't. Even now, when I think of these stones stood up an end, and I understand it all, I know what glass is. I know what. Even now, I can't imagine what it was like for people of 4,000 years ago who didn't know how it was done, and they never. Oh, fantastic! Look at this. I could never have designed anything like this. This was a solid glass crystal which sat in the apex. Each beam came up, there's 10 beams, each beam fitted in here, so that when you looked up at the apex, it's as if the beams ended in fresh air, because all you could see was the star-shaped hole. It was glass, and its position, its orientation in the apex at Stonehenge means that this face here was directly south. So when you find that the sun comes up in the morning on the summer solstice at this position here, and then goes round and then descends here, and right throughout the year the sun is every day at noon it would be here, and the position of the light coming inside all refracts. These faces here would act like mirrors. It's a thing called total internal reflection, and I can't wait to have this made, fit it into the apex, and look at all the different refractions within, and I can imagine how all the light would be broken up into all the colours of the rainbow, and at certain times of the year where the light would appear on the trilithians. To see light, it has to hit an object, and I believe the trilithians being stood up in the room at certain times of the year would have had beams of light at certain positions, and that would give them the time of day and it would give them the time of year. Now, it was only after the model had been made, and I'd been doing research for several years, and things happen, surprises come along, and one of the big surprises for me was I measured the distance across the crystal at the base, and it's 20 inches, and if you take that 20 inches as a unit of one, the height of Stonehenge from the floor to the apex is 30 units. Coincidentally, there's 30 uprights, and the distance from each point on the star is 30 units. The height of the Sarsen circle is 10 units. The diameter of the apex in the roof, 10 units. So there's a whole new series of mathematics. The symmetry is being shown in a completely different way. So these are things which to me are absolute proof when it comes to you look at it from one position or look at it from one way, and then it proves itself. I used to work for the MOD, and whenever I approach English heritage I get the same sort of feelings. Barbed wire fences, it's almost like a military establishment with all security. I remember when I first went there and carrying a portable camera, I was being followed by 4 security men, and they're peeping at me from behind the stones, as I walk round, and very sinister. And it's funny how everyone's fallen into that pattern where they go to Stonehenge, they don't speak to anybody, they're in the car and they arrive and they pick up these handsets, and everybody's in their own little bubble. Nobody speaks to anybody else, and they all go round in the same direction, and it's just horrible. I think the people who built Stonehenge, if they could come and see it as it is today, they would be absolutely horrified to see what's happened. That it's just a ruin and the people are walking around, milling around it. I think there's no life there. It needs to be brought back to life. It needs to be a place of wonder, a place of beauty. And I think English heritage, the way that it's become a machine, lifeless, I think they make something like 2.8 million a year just on the till alone. And that's all it is. It's just about marketing, it's about business, and it's about profits. And I can understand them wanting money for their charity and for their other buildings, but the way it's been done at Stonehenge, I think it's a terrible loss to the world, really, because we've got visitors coming from all over the world, from America and Japan, and I've interviewed many, and all the people feel disappointed that it's in the way it's been managed. For 1 million people to go walking between the stones every year isn't possible. It needs to be protected, and I think, for everyone to walk around the outside will have to be, but the fencing and the way it's the way we have to pay and the way we're all processed, I think the PR people or someone has got to look at this properly and talk to the general public, find out what would be best for everyone. A theory is an idea. It's fresh air. And what I'm saying is this is no longer a theory. This is a working, practical model, something we can examine, something we can scrutinise. Whereas with a theory, it's just always will remain a theory. Whereas this is completely different. This is a discovery.
People ask me, what do I want to do now I've made this great discovery? Ideally, I think the people who constructed Stonehenge, the people who knew it would last forever, they would like to see it restored. I'm absolutely convinced of that. I would love to see this building, this ruin, reconstructed and put back as it was. I doubt very much that will happen in my lifetime.
It's going to be a wonderful journey for people to come and see how Neolithic man really lived. For people to be re-educated about the past and find out just how intelligent and how organised they were.
But maybe we could make a replica. I think that, we could go anywhere in the world, maybe to America or Japan or Europe, and we could make a full-size replica of Stonehenge.
I'm hoping that we can get more and more interest. We can build a team of archaeologists and specialists in different fields and bring them all together and reconstruct Stonehenge how it was originally.
And we can recreate the floor, the roof, everything to absolute finite detail, so that people can come inside Stonehenge and experience it for themselves. It would speak for itself. You wouldn't have to have a guide or anyone to explain anything. Just the very fact that you can come inside and see it for yourself would be wonderful.
Because this isn't just about the UK and England. This is about the world heritage. It's about mankind as a whole. It's about evolution. And I believe Stonehenge is going to be part of our future, not our past.